Can we just look back to yesterday, where you hosted a cyber workshop with some risk managers at the event? Can you explain the kind of things that were discussed then and what you were hearing from the risk managers who attended?
Yeah, so first of all, we had, I think, the highest number of registered delegates, 90 delegates registered, so we had a full house in the room, which was really excellent. And the way we set up the workshop, we actually asked for risk manager volunteers from the audience to come and sit with us and have a mock cyber renewal meeting. And we actually had a volunteer, Danica Bogue, was kind enough from Reed Elsevier to join us on the stage. And so we really got to talk with her about how do we simplify and clarify what cyber is all about. It's a really complex topic. And so what we did during our session was broke it down into where cyber risk is, both online and offline components, as well as that transition period between online and offline worlds. We talked about who the risk comes from, so the internal risks, the external risks, the malicious risks, and the accidental human error issues that are really hard to control. And then we talked about what in the company is affected. So it affects protected data, both corporate and personally identifiable, media and intellectual property, as well as technology, both the technology that companies deploy and that they rely on. So one of the key takeaways from that framework is that we're not just talking about a data breach or data protection or privacy issue. This is a true business continuity and productivity risk for every business.
Cyber's often, I guess, misused or perhaps misunderstood word among some people. And it certainly means different things to different people. I mean, very much, to some it covers the whole spectrum of intangible risk, and to others it's specifically around computing or data, or even more importantly around hacking and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Do you think it's really important to actually define to your customers what you actually think cyber should be? And if that's the case, obviously, can you tell us what that definition is?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important to break down what we're talking about when we say cyber risk, because really cyber is just a convenient abbreviation for a complex set of interconnected risks, right? And so if we think about the framework that I described that we talked about in the workshop yesterday, kind of talking about where the risk is, who's creating it and what it's affecting is important, but then we have to think about what are the financial impacts that can actually affect a company's bottom line. And so what we do with cyber is we really break those down into 6 categories. So we talk about the crisis expenses you might incur in cleaning up a cyber incident mess. We talk about the extra expenses you might incur in getting your business back up and running, flipping on redundancies, etc. We talk about lost income, both during a period of cyber business interruption, as well as the reputation damage that could follow later on, future lost income.
That's the really long tail risk that
Absolutely.
worries a lot of insurers, isn't it?
A lot of insurers are worried about that. A lot of companies are worried about it, and what we see in actual incidents is it's a mixed bag. In some cases, individuals whose data has been lost by a company, say a retailer, maybe there's a short stock price drop that retailer experiences. Maybe there's a loss of revenue in the very short term, but by and large, from a retail perspective, consumers don't care that much. Now flip that over to financial services or healthcare. Consumers care a lot about whether or not their financial data or their health information has been compromised. So we see different levels of reputation being affected by cyber incidents.
I know there's some argument around that insurers aren't necessarily providing products within the sphere of cyber that are truly relevant to what clients need, and in some ways are just labeling products as cyber so they can say there's a product out there. Are you seeing that, and do you think if that's the case that actually the customers need to be perhaps a little bit more upfront with the insurers or with yourselves, I guess, to really explain what it is they want so that a product can be, or a service indeed, can be created around it?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you in the sense that a lot of off-the-shelf cyber products maybe only cover 60% of what you could consider cyber risk. Okay, so if we're talking about that additional 40%, maybe you can close that gap through manuscripting a form and talking to an insurer specifically about what your requirements and your loss scenarios are. But I also think there's a lot of innovation happening in the market right now. You take some of the new and innovative excess DIC products that can sit on top of a crime or a property policy to cover property damage and bodily injury from business interruption loss, or cyber crime, money theft. So if you think about a lot of the innovation that's happening, it's really about finding the right product and the right grouping of product or the right manuscript for a certain company.
I think it's the grouping that's important, isn't it? Because you've got an interconnectedness of risk. Which,
absolutely.
If you compartmentalise it, it's not going to work.
Right. It can be really helpful to think about creative structures in this case. So it's not just always about buying your traditional policies and then stacking a cyber policy next to them. It can be about building a cyber policy that sits excess or DIC. It can be about augmenting or increasing the amount of coverage or the scope of coverage in other policies. So there are a lot of different ways that you can think about how to insure your cyber risk. But certainly for every company, it's so critical, the dependence on technology, the dependence on information, that it's not a risk that you can continue to ignore.